So you come down just for this, or did you have some other things that you're doing in the area?
Pretty much just
Yeah.
this. And then we're going down to Blue Ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Some more pictures for us. I'm just gonna sit right here next to you. Wait till he looks over at me. But Dash is a two-toed sloth, although it makes more sense to say two-fingered, because it is the front where they have two, and on the back they actually have three. Big yawn there.
You sneaky.
I guess whoever decided to call sloths two and three-toed sloths, I guess just thought that all four limbs were legs, but for whatever reason I do consider the front to be arms, so I'm like, that's kind of like the fingers. But two-toed, two-fingered, whatever you want to call them. But they'll all have three on the back, so that's where they'll differ, is just from the front there. And it's most common that you see the two-toed sloths in captivity, at least in North America, because the three-toed sloths, their diets are really sensitive, and they can really only eat the leaves of the Cercophia trees, and those, of course, don't grow in North America. So to own a three-toed, you basically have to have a private jet to fly you to and from the rainforest once it get you the leaves that they eat. But the two-toed sloths, they can have their diets vary quite a bit, where they'll eat, of course, about 75% leaf material still in captivity. But they can eat, other veggies like squash and zucchini and sweet potatoes and corn and stuff like that, whereas the three-toed system can't really handle that. But something more specific about sloths is that they will use a bacterial process to digest their food. Unlike humans, we use an enzymatic process, and we're born with those enzymes. But sloths are not born with the bacteria that they use to process their food. And so around day 3, it was when the baby starts to be interested with what mom's eating and start to be, kind of interested in solid food. And so they'll climb up onto the chest of the mother, kind of start to lick the mother in the corners of her mouth while she's eating, and kind of eating some of the leaves out of her mouth while she's munching on them. And the bacteria that mom has in her gut is also in her saliva, and then will then be transferred over into the baby. And then the wild sloths live very different lives than captive sloths do. They have an entire ecosystem that lives on their back full of moss and algae, and a very specific type of moth that will live on their back that they have a symbiotic relationship with. And so those moths will produce the bacteria that the sloths are using to digest their food as well. And so it's important for an adult sloth to have those on their back, because they don't have mom anymore, they don't have the ability to get any of that saliva. And if the temperature drops outside, the sloth's body temperature will as well, because their temperature, they can't regulate their own body temperature. It just takes too much energy to do that. And so their temperature will drop, and the bacteria that they're using to digest their food in their stomach can be wiped out. And so that's no bueno for a sloth if they have no moths on their back. But if they have those, they can just turn around, look up more of that bacteria, and then they're good to go. But for the captive sloths, you can see he doesn't have any moss, algae, or moths living on his back. And he doesn't need it, because we keep him in a stable environment where it's always warm. We never let him get cold. And so they don't need, the constant replenishing of that bacteria. The bacteria that he has, that he's using to digest his food, originally came from his mother. And so he's just kept that in his system the whole time. But the reason why, when the sloth goes to the bathroom, they only go about once a week. They go all the way down to the base of the tree to go to the bathroom, is because of that sloth-moth symbiotic relationship. So you seem like you've probably watched a lot of our videos or something, or heard a lot about them before.
I had watched something not long ago, and it was talking about how they climb down the tree to use the bathroom.
Yeah, and they do that every single time. They don't even, not ever once, go from the tops of the trees. Although it makes a lot more sense to do that, because when they're down there on the floor, that's when they're most exposed to other animals that could potentially come through and eat them. And so really the only thing that sloths do relatively quickly is go to the bathroom, because they're down there, and all these other animals could just be walking by and see one and just go over and get them a snack. So the moths only have roughly a minute or two to get all of their eggs laid in the dung pile before they climb back up onto the sloth, or they're going to lose their ride back to the canopy of the rainforest, because those moths can't fly like other moths can. If they could, the sloths could just go to the bathroom up in the tops of the trees, the moths could fly down, lay their eggs, and then fly back up whenever they felt like it, but it doesn't work that way. The only place that those moths can live in the entire world is on the back of a sloth or in the dung pile of the sloth. And so it works out really well for them. And even in captivity, we don't have any of those moths, we don't need them, but they still go all the way to the floor to go to the bathroom, because it is hardwired into their brain that that's what they're supposed to do, because if they didn't, we wouldn't have sloths around anymore. They wouldn't be able to survive. And that's why, like how I was talking about, the legs are kind of sensitive, and the cat scritches can be kind of alarming for them. Even though Dash has never been exposed to any jaguars or ocelots or any kind of animal trying to do him harm, that is still, there's a little switch in their brain that if they have like a sensation like that, it just flips, and that's when they become more aware of what's going on. It could be kind of scary for them. Their brains are wired much differently than any other type of animal.
He's got his tongue stuck out.
And that's a characteristic trait very specific for Dash. None of our other sloths do that. Of course, we've only had Chloe for about 2 weeks, but she hasn't done it yet. Dash has had his tongue, just a little bit of his tongue sticking out like that since day one. I mean, he always leaves just a little bit hanging out unless he's eating, or he's just gotten done eating. But after he gets comfortable and gets settled in, that little tongue starts to stick out. And then when he's sleeping, in a real deep sleep, it's like half his tongue is hanging out of his mouth.
Are they only 2 you have?
No, so we have 4. So Flash and Zoe are both of our adult sloths. Well, Zoe's almost an adult. She's almost 2 years old. She'll be 2 in December. But Flash is 7 years old.
Okay.
And so Dash, Chloe, and Zoe are all 3 ambassador sloths, which means that they're comfortable being held like this. And that does not come natural for sloths. Naturally, sloths are very solitary animals that are not going to be seeking out human interaction like this. So Dash, you know, he was still kind of waking up in his basket there. But if he's awake and he sees me standing there, I don't even have to scoop him up. He immediately will climb up onto me because he actively seeks out human interaction, and he knows right at about 4 o'clock, this is my time to shine. I'm going to be held. This is my time every afternoon. This is when I'm supposed to be held. And he looks forward to it. But that didn't just come. That didn't just happen overnight. And so the conditioning for him started at about a week old when he was still on his mother's back and still nursing from his mother. But the breeder would go in there in the ambassador room where he had all of his sloths that were in the ambassador program and just kind of slowly touch on the baby. And the mother has most likely gone through the ambassador program herself and is comfortable with that. And so mom's not stressed, therefore baby's not stressed, because the babies will feed off of the mother's energy, just like Dash would feed off of the person's energy when he's sitting on somebody. You're petting real nice and slow, and so he's just falling asleep right now. But somebody that's a lot more active and talking and moving and petting quicker, he's a lot more awake, and he's like, what's going on? But so as long as the baby always has a positive interaction going on, and that's just always something that they, you know, enjoy having, and they kind of go from the mother being their source of comfort, and then after they're weaned from their mothers, or by their mothers, I should say, because it's always the mother's choice. It's never influenced by the breeder whatsoever. And the mothers, they're not really famously good mothers like some other animals. Like they'll have a real strong bond with their babies. It's not the same way for sloth because they're so solitary. After the baby starts to get old enough to know how to live on their own, the mother's just like, well, good luck. But after they're weaned, they kind of go from mom being their source of comfort to then humans being their source of comfort. And so that's why he still finds, you know, comfort in being held like this. And he will be that way for the rest of his life. But now Flash, our 7-year-old sloth, is not an ambassador sloth, so he was not raised the same way that Dash was, and he came from a totally different breeding facility. He was still born and raised in the States, but was much more of like a hands-off raising. You know, the mother just could raise him however she wanted to. Then after he was weaned, he basically went into solitary confinement, just in an enclosure by himself. And that's what naturally sloths are going to seek out. That's what, you know, that's just naturally how they're geared or wired. Try to mix the two together and get geared. But and so he just enjoys, you know, being by himself like that. So he's always going to be by himself. But eventually Dash and Zoe and Chloe will all try to kind of implement them to being together once we get our sloth house built, which will be a really big kind of aviary type thing where they'll all have kind of separate corners of the enclosure to rest as they want to. And that's what it'll be. You know, they're definitely not going to like snuggle up right next to each other like a cat would. They'll just kind of, you know, exist in the same space. That's how naturally they're just wired. I think that's why a lot of people associate with sloths so well. Everybody thinks that that's their spirit animal just because I'm antisocial too. I don't want to be around anybody
That's
else.
what my son always says. He says, sloth is my spirit.
You got to put him to sleep. Calmed out. Says I never fully waked up from my nap. So did anybody else come with with you, or did you just come down here?
No, somebody's with me, but he didn't wanna do the
Oh,
encounter.
well.
Okay, I'm doing it.
yeah. There you go. A lot of people are surprised about how soft they are too, because a lot of people have seen pictures and videos of wild sloths
Yeah.
that look like they'd be a lot more coarse, and they are. They're really bristly in the wild. Each individual hair of a sloth, even in captivity, they have tiny little micro slits throughout them that when they're rained on in the wild repeatedly over and over again, they don't shake like a dog would. And so that rainwater will get trapped in those little hairs, the little divots, and that's what will form that moss and algae over time. And they rely on that, not only for camouflage, but it's also a food source for those moths that they rely on for that bacteria, so it just works out really well for them. And that whole entire ecosystem, basically is what it is, it's living on their back, is really important for the sloth. And so if somebody were to see a sloth like myself, before I knew anything about sloths whatsoever, saw this video of a sloth passing a roadway, and it was just crawling real slow, and so somebody got out and offered it a little stick to climb onto, so we climbed up onto this stick, and he like brought it over to the side of the road. But on the back of that sloth was all this green stuff, and bugs were crawling throughout it, and I was like, that sloth is sick. Something is going on with it. It needs to go to a rehab facility. All that needs to be cleaned off of it. Probably needs to be put on some kind of medication. Like, something needs to be done with this animal. But if I did that, if somebody did that to a sloth, that sloth would have roughly 2.5 weeks left to live. Because if all that's stripped from them, not only then do they don't have any camouflage, but if the temperature drops outside and all of that bacteria in their gut is wiped out because their temperature drops too, then they're left with no way to digest their food. And a sloth can pass away with a full belly of food, continuously eating every day, but pass from starvation because they can't digest any of it. Can't get any nutrients from any of the food to go into their bodies. And so that's why we're so big on education and doing all the, not only just the encounters, but a lot of the live streams that we do and everything too. Even if people aren't able to come and have this kind of experience, still get a little bit of information about them, just to kind of make more educated decisions, especially about doing other sloth encounters. So maybe they're in, another part of the states where it's not feasible for them to come, but maybe they're thinking about going on a cruise. Well, up until the past just few months, it's been a popular thing that if their cruise ship stops in Roatan, Honduras, people will get off the cruise ship and there's sloth encounters everywhere, holding sloth encounters. And those sloths are wild sloths that have been brought down out of the trees, and lots of time before they do the encounters, those sloths are scrubbed from all of that moss and algae and everything, because nobody wants to hold a green, gross looking sloth or take pictures with it. And so the people down there, that aren't actually sanctuaries are just in it for the money, and they know that people are obsessed with sloths. And even if somebody hasn't booked for a sloth encounter, they've got all these little roadside petting zoos set up with all these different kind of animals like monkeys and birds and stuff that they've literally just taken from the rainforest that they're trying to get people to interact with so that they can make a living. And that's how their dad did it, that's how their grandfather did it, so that's just what they're doing. So I can't really say that I blame them, but in the same sense, maybe they don't understand, maybe they just don't care that that's what happens to these guys. And maybe they put them back out into the rainforest after they're done doing those encounters. But after that sloth has had all that scrubbed from them and then have had, 50, 100, 200 people that has been holding them, they're completely out of energy and out of resources to even be able to climb or to make it in the wild. And so it just really doesn't work out too well for them. That's why we're so passionate about conservation and getting all that information and everything out there, because these guys are really cool animals and we would like to have them around for as long as we can. That's kind of the purpose for having them in captivity, breeding them captively like this. Not to say that we do here, we haven't had any babies born here, we've got them all from the breeder. Not sure what the future plans are there, but it's definitely a good thing that we've got, some of the bigger breeding facilities like that know what they're doing and has a passion for it. So that, because the rainforest is ever shrinking and all the trees are being cut down more and more every day. So while the sloths are not on the endangered list yet, the habitat definitely is, and so that's not good for any of the animals that are down there. But he is just completely asleep.
He is.
Let's see if I can get a few more pictures over here on the side for you. Let's see, do I hold it or swap it?
Oh.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's different on everybody's phones, and so I've got to figure out how everybody's
Oh,
phones
he's
work.
opening his eyes.
Hey, buddy. What are you doing? Here's a close up of that tongue, too. He's like completely slouched over.
He's looking now.
Anyway, I mentioned earlier how their eyesight is really poor. So they have a condition that's called rod monochromacy. And that means they only have rod cells in their eyes and no cone cells. So we have both, and the cone cells allow us to see color, where the rod cells pick up motion and little things in between. But the sloths only have the rod cells, so they are completely colorblind. And what they do see is not just in black and white, it's basically just blobs and shapes. So when I'm standing back behind him, sometimes he'll turn his head back and look at me, but if I wasn't talking, he would not be able to tell who I am. You know, somebody's standing over there that looks like the blob of a person, but they can't really tell much beyond that. At nighttime, they see a lot better actually, and a lot better than we do, because like I said, their vision kind of works like night goggle vision. Looking through night goggles in the middle of the day, you really can't make much out. But for them, it works out. So they are nocturnal animals, and they don't sleep as much as scientists used to think. So a really comfortable resting position for a sloth is holding on to the branch up really close to it with their head tucked in between their front legs. So in that position, you might think that the sloth is sleeping, so that's what scientists use kind of.
Oh, really?
Hey, bro.
It was. Black and white one. Watch feet. Hard in the wood, both sides.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Come on up. Right.
You made it just in time.
Priorities, yeah, we can go to Starbucks on the way.
Yeah. Hey everybody, if you're just joining us, this is Ruff. He's a red kangaroo. We're getting ready to head inside to check out the baby camels. We have two baby camels here, Humphrey and Prince Ali. One of them's a Bactrian camel and the other one's a dromedary. That's a good boy. So come on out to Ocoee Riverside Farm and meet a bunch of awesome animals.